Legal setback for Occupy protesters over injunctions. Fallout from an assault on media tycoon Jimmy Lai. And regional issues on the agenda at East Asia Summit.
Good evening. It is day 47 of the Occupy protests, and demonstrators fighting court injunctions over the removal of barricades have suffered a legal setback. You are looking at live pictures of Admiralty and Mongkok protest sites. As you can see, demonstrators are still making their presence felt. Now, a high court judge today dismissed an appeal by the Occupy protesters against injunction orders to clear out the Mongkok protest site. However, it is still not clear yet when authorities will take action. Evelina Lung tells us more.
The injunction orders that allow bailiffs to clear out the Mongkok Occupy protest site will continue to be in place. This comes after the High Court rejected protester Dominic Fox's appeal against the injunction orders and the submission for a stay of execution of the orders. Fox lawyer Gladys Lee argued that problems related to security issues should be dealt with by the Security Bureau, not by individuals. This, Lee said, is to prevent private individuals from abusing the court and seeking civil remedy when circumstances don't amount to the invasion of private rights. Also, she added that one has to suffer particular, direct and substantial damage before presenting a case to the court against public nuisance. Lee added the application for a submission for a stay of execution of the injunction orders is to ensure protesters know the details of the orders before authorities take action. However, Judge Thomas Au ruled the appeal as unsound. He also refused to delay the injunctions. The judgment was welcomed by one of the plaintiffs' legal representatives, who said authorities will be assisting them with their clearance action.
We will envisage, on the when enforcing the order, that might be disorder, public disorder. So every time we will inform the police of our intended action. So this time is no exception.
In the afternoon, a separate court hearing was held on how the injunction orders should be carried out. Among the issues discussed, should defendants be brought to the court within 48 hours of the arrest? Which court should they be brought to? And should they be granted bail? He will give his judgment either today or tomorrow. Even after the judge gives a stamp of approval for authorities to carry out the injunction orders, the injunction's plaintiffs still have to run a statement of the orders in newspapers and make the details of the injunction orders visible to the protesters in Mongkok before any action can be taken. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
5 people arrested over an assault on Next Media chairman Jimmy Lai yesterday have been freed on bail. And as Joel De Silva reports, police came under fire today for arresting 2 Occupy volunteers.
These 2 Occupy volunteers have been released on bail and will have to report to the police in 2 weeks' time. They are accused of taking part in a fight in a public place. The case has to do with an assault on media tycoon Jimmy Lai at the Admiralty protest site yesterday. The 2 volunteers restrained a man who, along with 2 others, threw rotten animal parts at Lai. The alleged attackers, detained on suspicion of common assault and fighting in a public place, have also been freed on bail. The volunteers claim they were merely assisting the police. And they say they were surprised when finding out they were under arrest after going to the police station to testify. The decision to go after those who allegedly initiated the attack and those who attempted to stop it is not going down well.
I think it's very unfair. The 2 guards, they're just making sure the order, they're keeping orders, and they were arrested and accused.
Legislators who side with the Occupy volunteers say their arrests were politically motivated.
In fact, what they did gave us the impression that there must be some directives from the higher level of the police.
The Civil Human Rights Front led a rally to the police headquarters demanding an apology. Officers tried to stop them, saying it was an unauthorized protest. Already at their destination, demonstrators called for any charges against the volunteers to be dropped. Having managed to bring their indignation to the headquarters of the police, demonstrators not only demanded an apology for the handling of yesterday's scuffles, but they also called for the resignation of Police Chief Andy Zhang, who they say is to blame for alleged police misconduct since the beginning of the protests. Sonya Silva, TVB News.
Student leaders, Occupy Central organizers, and pan-democratic lawmakers met today to discuss details of a prepared trip by students to Beijing. Among those who attended the meeting were Alex Chow and Lester Shum of the Federation of Students, as well as lawmakers Helena Wong and Lee Chuk-yan. The students want to send representatives to Beijing to meet with central government officials on political reform. They want Beijing to retract the National People's Congress Standing Committee's framework announced on August 31st. LegCo President Sung Yat-sing waded in. He said he doubts anything constructive will come of that trip. He said the conversation would be meaningless if the students just want to reiterate their opposition to the framework.
Overseas now, and world leaders joined their counterparts from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations for a series of summits in Myanmar this week. And while little of substance was expected, it did give a chance for some political foes to sit down for face-to-face meetings. Alan Booknia reports.
The East Asia Summit brought together the 10 ASEAN nations, along with the leaders of China, Japan, South Korea, the United States, Russia, India, Australia, and New Zealand. For U.S. President Barack Obama, it presented another opportunity to strengthen America's relationships in the region.
I intend to continue to invest in these efforts not only during our summits, but more importantly, on a day-to-day basis. During the past 6 years, we've made great strides in elevating and expanding this partnership, but I think we all agree we can still do more.
Territorial disputes of strategic importance to most countries at the summit were tops on the agenda. It was agreed that China and Southeast Asian nations would work toward an early conclusion for a code of conduct in the South China Sea. Japanese media reported that Premier Li Keqiang met on the sidelines with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last night. It's reported they agreed to take steps to improve Sino-Japanese relations and boost strategic bilateral development. The summit is the culmination of a year in the diplomatic limelight for Myanmar and its president Thein Sein, after long being shunted to the international sidelines under its former military rulers. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
And there's been mixed reaction to a landmark climate change agreement between China and the U.S. Some call it a big step forward, while others insist more needs to be done.
The Secretary General commended the joint announcement by China and the United States of their post-2020 action on climate change as an important contribution to the new climate agreement to be reached next year in Paris. The Secretary General thanked President Xi Jinping and President Barack Obama for their personal commitment to work together to remove any impediments to reaching an agreement in Paris.
I was particularly distressed by the deal apparently he's reached with the Chinese on his current trip, which, as I read the agreement, requires the Chinese to do nothing at all for 16 years, while these carbon emission regulations are creating havoc in my state and other states around the country.
It's hard for these countries to stand on the sidelines now. You have the two biggest emitters moving forward, and I think that'll put a lot of pressure on other countries to come forward with their climate targets in early next year.
Turkish police have rounded up 12 members of an ultra-nationalist group after 3 U.S. sailors were attacked on a crowded street in Istanbul. Video posted on the website of the Turkish Youth Union shows the attackers surrounding the sailors, calling them murderers, and throwing red paint at the men. The 3 sailors were not hurt and are back aboard their U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer. Shore leave has been canceled and the ship is due to leave Istanbul soon. The U.S. Embassy has condemned the incident, calling it appalling. Anti-American sentiment in Turkey is not widespread, but some Turks accuse Washington of meddling in regional affairs. The UN Security Council has held another emergency meeting over the crisis in Ukraine. This happened hours after NATO's top commander said Russian military equipment was being sent to regions held by pro-Moscow rebels. As James Aiken reports, there are now fears a ceasefire between the two sides is collapsing.
It was the 26th time the Council had held an emergency session over Ukraine, and again the meeting adjourned without any action. As a permanent member of the 15-member Council, Russia has veto power. NATO says columns of Russian troops, tanks, and weaponry have been entering Ukraine over the past 48 hours.
Today, we have all the evidence to constate that Ukraine is surrounded by a huge amount of armaments and the troops. We demand from Russia, now in here, to explain.
Russia's deputy UN envoy Alexander Pankin said NATO's assessment did not reflect the situation on the ground. He says the equipment and troops are on Russian territory, not Ukrainian.
The challenge with the account of the Russians is that NATO and the OSCE both conveyed that large military convoys of Russian-supplied heavy weapons and tanks have moved to the front lines of the conflict in recent days. That's a clear violation of the Minsk protocols.
As the death toll in the conflict grows, so too do fears that a ceasefire between Ukraine and pro-Russian rebels is disintegrating, reigniting fears of full-scale fighting or sporadic battles that could drag on for months.
While either scenario would be a catastrophe for Ukraine, a third concerning prospect is that of a frozen or protracted conflict that would entrench the current status quo in southeastern Ukraine for years or several decades to come.
So the question is not what Russia will try to do in eastern Ukraine. The question is what we, the international community, will seek to do to prevent yet another frozen conflict in Europe manufactured by Russia.
European Union foreign ministers meet in Brussels on Monday, but they are not expected to step up current sanctions against Russia. In the meantime, Kiev is redeploying troops in the east in preparation for a possible new offensive by pro-Russian separatists. James Aiken, TVB News.
And still ahead in our newscast. Dispute over subcommittee agenda puts government and LegCo on collision course. A landmark landing on a comet. And a scare for 2 window washers in New York.
A group of Americans fighting the deadly Ebola virus at a treatment center in Liberia.
We want to talk to some of the patients, but you have to keep your distance.
Also on the next 60 Minutes, comedian Steve Carroll taking on a deadly serious role at the height of his Hollywood success. Saturday night, 60 Minutes at 6:30 on Pearl.
You can't come to Buenos Aires without taking a tango lesson.
Be charmed by Buenos Aires.
Bull's blood. Yeah. They painted that with bull's blood.
Hop on a ferry to Uruguay's sleepy Colonia, or take a flight to Argentina's famed wine region.
They're really sweet.
Monday, Globe Trekker at 8:30 on Pearl.
Get ready for a new page in motorsport history. Welcome to Asia's most legendary race. This November, experience the Sun City Group 61st Macau Grand Prix.